I'm Zen from Neo. Welcome to Nightbreed. How's it going, man?
Very good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. So you guys have as we record, you guys have got an album coming out on Friday, but if it's all right, I wouldn't mind
Yep,
going way back to the start before we get into the
sure.
new stuff. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So back in 2003, Melbourne, what prompted this band to sort of kick off?
Well, yeah, this is our 20-year anniversary, so it's
Yeah, yeah.
somewhat daunting, but it feels good that we've made it this far.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, 20 years ago, well, I wanted to start a band for many years, more of a melodic sort of black metal band, because I was quite influenced by kind of mid 90s black metal, like Emperor, early
Yeah,
Satyricon bands like that.
yeah.
And but I also liked music that was still different, and so I wanted to form a band that was along that sort of vein, but with a stringed instrument, either violin or cello.
Yeah.
And initially, we had four members, so vocals, bass, guitar, and drums. And then about 6 months after that, I found Tim, our violinist, on a forum, which is no longer around now, and well, he was talking about stringed instruments and metal, and I contacted him and asking him if he wanted to try out or come to a rehearsal and um, see what would happen. And yeah, so we just wanted to make something a bit different, something that wasn't necessarily in the Australian music scene at the time, and just because the Australian population isn't necessarily that big, and so the diversity of music overall isn't that great. But ultimately, when I look back on it now, the music within Australia for what we have is very diverse in itself, and I think quite original.
Yeah.
We haven't had too much of that outside influence compared to what other countries, well, yeah, say, what other continents, I guess, have had.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so ultimately the start was for more of a melodic black metal band. However, when you get all the different sort of musicians that come along, you lose members, more members come along. It kind of evolves from there, and I've got some amazing musicians along the way, less black metal inclined, and so I guess the sound has kind of progressed from there. But I'm completely happy with what we have now. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. I meant to ask about that too. Like, having different members coming in. What's the writing process like? Are people bringing riffs in? Like, how does the song kind of crafting happen?
Yeah, everyone contributes to some extent. Some people write more than others, or some people come in with a few riffs. Originally, we used to all be based within Melbourne, Australia,
Hmm.
and we would all rehearse every week without fail. We would all come to a rehearsal studio, just jam and see what comes out. And now it's a little bit difficult where half our band is overseas, and we only have three members in Melbourne now. And so we throw riffs at each other, and ultimately that's how the last album was made. Uh, in a sense, while recording and some of the writing, but yeah, it's just bits and pieces from everyone, and someone may come in with half a song or try to bring in a full song, and then we'll just kind of all tear it apart and rejig it so that it makes sense for everyone, and it just evolves from there. It's a collaborative effort ultimately.
Yeah, that's cool. So on the first album, the track "And Plague Flowers the Kaleidoscope" was included in the teaching curriculum at the Sydney Conservatorium. Did you ever think, a song that you'd worked on would be being studied by music students? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really bizarre. Um, I mean, that's quite a long time now, and I have no idea if it's even part of it anymore. I highly doubt it, but
Yeah,
it was very humbling for us, and at the same time, for a university professor to approach us to ask us. So someone of that, when you think of classical music, you tend to, I don't know, you might get a bit more of a have a sense that that might be slightly more narrow-minded in degrees of what's
yeah,
musically accepted.
Mhm.
And, I think that kind of opened our eyes a little bit more to say, okay, so, you know, people of within this field, this stature, have they're just as open-minded as we are. And so, and Matthew Heinsohn was a professor, and he, loved this sort of music, and it was just bizarre. But yeah, very appreciative. And I don't know, it's still hard to digest now. So it's just one of those things you never expect, but I'm truly grateful for.
Yeah, that's cool. So you guys had a bit like a pretty big Asian tour off the back of that album. How was that? That must have been great, going around all those countries and everything.
Asia. Oh, geez, this is years ago. I can
It
hardly
was,
remember.
yeah.
Can hardly remember that. It's a really steep learning curve, especially countries where English isn't necessarily part of, I guess, schooling. Whereas, if you go to Europe, I guess it's a language that's taught at school for most people. So,
Hmm.
so in Asia, it was a little bit more difficult. We had to have a promoter that spoke four different languages as well to help translate everything for us. And without that, we would have failed miserably. Um, Especially working out things to eat and that sort of thing as well. But yeah, it's very interesting to see the difference in how people appreciate your music from different countries. So from, in Japan, um, everyone just loves different music.
Hmm.
It's incredible. But then you go to China and you're not sure if they like your music. It's a lot more reserved. I mean, they're coming to your show, so they kind of, for the most part, enjoy what you do.
Yeah.
And then you go to Hong Kong, which is ultimately, I guess, part of that, and they go crazy. It's such a difference, and but in general across Asia, they just love music that's different. I think,
Hmm.
um, and we'd love to get there across there even more, but you know, we have so many other countries to play across, and we'll get there again.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So 2014, Citadel, the second album on season came out on Season of Miss, and it hits
Yeah.
number 42 on the ARIA charts. I mean, that number, I think, considering what else is on the ARIA charts, that's quite
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah, I mean, even we never really considered anything like that. It's to think back on it now, we were still, that was our second album. And I keep coming back to the fact that, metal is such a niche. Not only is it somewhat niche across the world, it's within Australia, it's niche. Our population is tiny in comparison to everywhere else. And, you know, um, I think ultimately it gives hope to other metal bands to say that, there is there is a chance that, things will happen for you if you work your ass off, you keep trying, keep developing and practicing. And I think it proved to us that, that people are kind of willing to open their minds to listen to other music. And yeah, I think it was a good indication of how positive what we were doing was, and that our music not only appeals to metalheads but also appeals to some of the general public as well,
Mm.
due to the different elements we include in.
Yeah, that's cool. And around that time too, you crowdfunded a tour, and you made it in 2 days. And you
Yeah,
guys use Patreon and stuff. How is that?
yeah,
Like, I've never explored that much. It seems like it's been successful for you.
yeah. It's yeah. So firstly, so we wanted to, because we broke the Australian record in terms of crowdfunding for something music related. And
Yeah.
so
Mm.
that allowed us to do a world tour. And then based upon that, so that was the only way we could have done a world tour at that point in time and done any sort of touring.
Mm.
And that kind of opened the doorway to, well, we realized that we have a lot of people out there that wanted to support what we were doing and wanted to see us play shows and and us to just create more music. And so we kind of sat down, and Tim, he's the more business minded person, and he ultimately came up with the idea of well, we online people had suggested stuff like Patreon, but we didn't really know too much about it. And then kind of Tim looked into it a little bit more and then came up with some great ideas that we discussed. And then in 2016, we actually launched our Patreon. And we knew that we would cop a lot of flack for it from, industry people, as well as, people in general. Um, but, and we did, but at the same time, we got a lot of support as well. So it's ultimately a subscription service where people sign up to your platform and there are perks. So it's basically people are paying for something that's behind the scenes sort of thing, early access or cheaper merch, things like that. So it's almost like it's like a fan club ultimately.
Yeah, it's cool.
So it's and now after all these years, so many people are doing it. It's like almost a standard thing people do. And so, but we I think we opened in a way we opened the gateway, and then I think coming up with the pandemic, I think that more people realize that it is a good idea.
Yeah, especially when other revenues are cut off, you can still access music, and you guys are still yeah.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
No, it's cool. And that talking about that tour, you toured with some other huge bands, like Enslaved, Cradle of Filth. You must have some good memories from back then, yeah.
Yeah, it's when before you're even in a band, you're just a music listener. You look at all these bands from, when you're a kid, you're reading Terrorizer or whatever it was, and you see, say, Enslaved or Cradle of Filth on the front cover, and you never even contemplate being able to one, play in a band, to be able to support those sorts of bands. And so when you get to that stage, it's one of those moments in time that you never forget. You value where you are, and it's almost like it's a realization that if you work your ass off, certain things like this are possible. And touring with bands like that, I think, taught us a lot in regards to professionalism, work ethic. Just taught us a lot. When you see bands like that tour, they're like well-oiled machines, and you just want to aim to be like that, if not better. And it's it is a humbling experience, and we're forever grateful to be able to share the stage with bands like that.
Yeah, that's cool. So away from Neo for a minute, you got some other projects on the go. Omega Infinity started sort of 2018 with let's say this wrong, hopefully not, Tentacle Parkinson. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, Tentacle Parkinson.
Tentacle, there we go. So how'd you get together with Tentacle? Because he's based in Germany, right?
Yeah, he is. He's well, he was in a band prior to this one, called I'm gonna pronounce it wrong, Todd. It was a German sort of proggy dark metal sort of band. And he's a drummer for them. And he also wrote for a webzine at the same time. But in saying that, both our bands at that time were signed to a label called Code 666, which is in Italy, which Paul Labai was released on. And so we had met ultimately through that, and pretty much stayed in contact. And on tour we'd catch up and whatnot. And then he, because he's Todd kind of, I guess, went on hiatus, if not disbanded. I'm not 100% sure now, but he wanted to do other music as well, and I wanted to kind of experiment a little bit with something a little bit darker than what Neo is,
Mm.
a little more extreme. And he came to me one day and said, gave me a whole lot of music to listen to of what he was doing in his spare time. He said, "Do you want to do vocals on this?" And as soon as I heard the first track, I said yes. So
Mhm.
here we are.
Yeah, no, that's great. And are there plans for that to continue? So obviously the anti-current came out in February.
Yeah.
Is there plans to work on another release?
Yeah, we have a lot of material that's already written. The
Hmm.
third album is pretty much written except for me to record my vocals. So that's as soon as my vocals are done, that is done.
Mm.
And most of the music for the fourth album is also done. And we have more material after that. So this project isn't necessarily slowing down, it's continuing.
Mm.
And we get a little bit more experimental, a little bit darker in some aspects, a little bit more industrial. So it will vary quite a lot, but at the same time, it'll ultimately sound as familiar with our both our current albums.
Yeah, cool. And then you've also got Antiqua. Uh
Antigua, yeah.
Antiqua, there you go.
Yeah, I changed the U to a V.
Yeah, it looks cool. So a couple of singles, but the thing that grabbed my attention was it's such an international
Yeah.
you know, band. Like how did you get together with all those musics?
Uh so it's I think there's a long story and a short version, but I'd so we supported Cradle of Filth when so Neo supported Cradle in, can't remember what year, might have been 2015 or 13, something like that.
Yeah.
I think it was 2013. But anyway, we supported them. I became friends with Lindsay, who at the time was keys and backing vocals.
Hmm.
And we stayed in touch. And a few years later, we decided to start a project together. Um, and but that was an initial kind of it was conceived in Rome when we were on tour together with Cradle of Filth.
Hmm.
And we decided to see what other musicians would like to join, anyone we were kind of familiar with that would be interested. So I found Talai, who was a cellist. She was we toured with the Ocean
Hmm.
in Australia years ago, and that's where I met Delay and got her on board. And so most of them are basically people that we've kind of toured with. Aside, I think, or aside from Fabian, who plays in black metal, black metal band at the time called Nagator from Germany, and Harkon or Memnock from a doom band from Norway called Abyssic.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was just all musicians. I thought that would uh, uh, complement what I was after for Antigua, which is kind of it's, I guess, somewhat similar to what I originally envisaged Neo to be.
Hmm.
But after all these years, it's managed to come together, and it is difficult being that everyone in the band is an established musician, and it does make it a little bit more difficult when people are on tour, and we're 7 members spread across 5 countries. So,
Hmm.
it is possible to create music as we have done the last 2 albums where everyone's in separate countries. But yeah, it is a long process, and it's ultimately a lot more complex than what Neo is. Even though Neo is very complex music, at the same time, this has just as much, if not a fair bit more complexity to it.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So eventually we'll get more of that when the stars align, right?
We will. I just have my Neo to get through. I have
Hmm.
recording for another band, and yeah, we're all waiting on me at the moment.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
What's the other band? You said you're recording with another band.
I'm recording because I have another project with Seska from Virgin Black. I'm not
Hmm.
sure if you're aware of they're an old doom band from Adelaide,
Hmm.
and so this project is called Spine
Hmm.
with two eyes, and it's Seska and myself creating a depressive black, well, primarily doom, but it has a rusty, depressive black metal edge to it. So
Hmm.
that is almost done, except for my vocals as well.
Hmm.
So as soon as that is done, um, I'm hoping to finish the vocals by the end of next month,
Oh, cool.
and
Yeah,
then hopefully people will hear something later in the year.
excellent. Oh, that's great.
Mm.
And while we're talking about other bands, what are you
Mm.
listening to at the moment? What's got you interested?
At the moment, I've been quite interested in not necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of black metal because I listen to a lot of black metal anyway, and I grew up on a lot of that. So
Hmm.
that's where my heart lies. But lately, I've been listening to. There's a French band that's I recently come across called, I believe it's Fange, so
Hmm.
Fange from France. They've just released an album called Privation, I believe. It's a very sludge industrial sort of project, which I highly recommend. I probably think, based upon everything that I've heard at the moment, might be my album of the year
Cool.
already.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and for progressive music, there's a band called Etre, which is ETRE from Denmark. I don't necessarily listen to a lot of prog music, but I heard them and very young band. I just heard them. I thought there's so much potential, and I'm looking forward to how they'll grow. I think they're releasing an EP later this year. But yeah, definitely if you're into prog music and female vocals, then I'd probably suggest checking out them.
Yeah, cool. And then yeah, we've got Exile, your new Neo album coming out on the 24th of March. Um,
Yes.
and so this was planned much earlier, right? And then COVID happened. So
It certainly was.
yeah. So how did the delays change things? Because like you guys kept writing, right? Like it's not the exact same release we were going to get then.
No, it was all planned to be recorded within 2020.
Hmm.
So everything was, yeah, organized because we were having Dan. Dan was sent over to do drums in the US, and he'd finished them, I believe, early March, and he got back to Australia within 24 hours of them closing the borders due to the pandemic.
Hmm.
And we were our bassist and guitarist. So guitarist was in France, bassist was in Italy. They couldn't come to the country to record either.
Hmm.
And ultimately, everyone recorded where they were. So we ended up, I believe, the whole thing was recorded in nine studios and four countries, I think, from memory. So,
Hmm.
and you know, and vocals, say for instance, Tim, his vocals were, you know, spread out in between lockdowns over 2 years.
Hmm.
And so, you know, you try to record, you record maybe a song, then you have a lockdown for a couple of months, studios close, and you don't have access to anything. So it made it really hard. But I think overall, the time, because a lot of the music was written, or the basis of a lot of the music was written um, prior to the pandemic.
Hmm.
And then we were going to fine tune everything, develop other ideas, and vocals and violin usually come last.
Hmm.
And so that probably allowed Tim and myself to kind of fine tune our parts, develop them, throw out things after thinking too much about them. I guess that can be a blessing and a curse having that much time.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, I think it was to our benefit. I think it kind of maybe matured our sound a little bit more.
Hmm. Oh, cool. And talking about you and Tim, because you're obviously both on vocals, do you I don't know, do you bring lyrics in and say, does this match what you're doing, or do you kind of discuss what the themes are beforehand, that sort of thing?
Well, I because I write all lyrics,
Oh,
and
okay, sure. Yeah.
yeah, so I write all Tim's. lyric parts as well. I don't write his melodies or anything. He'll
Mm,
usually come up with a melody idea and send a demo through to me based upon the sounds that he's making within that demo, and I will work with my lyrics to see what fits and what may work, throw them back to him and see how they work for him.
mm,
But I do tend to write a little bit different for both of us. For my parts, I might be a little bit darker in my kind of lyrical um, context, and whereas I might give Tim something a bit more uplifting or emotive in a sense. But yeah, so it kind of matches a little bit more, and so you know, our music, everything has a bit of a contrast,
mm,
especially between Tim and myself. So I try to stick with that. And you know, but we're never conscious about the never really, we don't force the contrast. It's just who we are.
mm.
And you know, it comes out in that way. And you know, it was brought to our attention like later on as to that it's such a contrast. And you know, and Tim and I are completely different people, yet at the same time, we work really well together. Um, and we're still in the band 20 years later together. So,
Yeah, that's testament to it. That's really impressive.
yeah,
Um, so there's a couple of videos out already for this one, and they look
yeah,
amazing, like nice big budget
thank
things.
you.
How did they come together? Like, did you have much input in like, we want this sort of feel, or did somebody else kind of bring something to that?
No, with the videos. So basically, I, it's all came from my ideas to put them together. We, for both the videos, I worked with Dave Hunter from, he's a drummer from Circles. I'm not sure if you're aware, Australian band
Mm,
Circles. And I came with him with the idea for both of them. And you know, when you're a metal band, generally you don't have much of a budget to work with.
mm,
So you know, we discussed a lot of ideas about how to achieve certain things, and I come to him with all my ideas to ask, you know, what is possible, what 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 can't I do, basically.
mm.
Um, and so it was a very smooth process. However, when I look at music videos now and look at the credits and see how many people are involved in the credits, I know why, because when you do it yourself, you realize how much work everything is. And you know, gave me a few gray hairs, but I think the end result kind of worked out. And I think ultimately it's worth it. I think bands need to think about more about the visual aspect of promoting their music.
Mm.
I think it. I think it's another thing people can latch on to help them understand the music a little bit more if they're not necessarily into that music, and just to create a give people some imagination to work with. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's good. It kind of gives it a mood. Like it has a mood already,
Yeah,
but you're sort of like
yeah,
guiding the mood a bit more, I suppose, with some
mm.
visual. It's good.
Yeah. A little direction.
Yeah. So you guys have a massive tour coming up through May and the early June.
Mhm.
With you're playing with the oh, I say this wrong too, the Omnific.
Yep. The
I interviewed
Omnific.
the
Yeah.
yeah, I interviewed those guys a couple of years ago. How are you friends with those guys? Do you know those guys already?
I don't know them personally. I believe Tim might.
Hmm.
Um, but I think we might have played with them many years ago. But you know, they're an amazing sort of prog instrumental band.
Hmm.
And you know, we thought, you know, we want you know, the tour that we have is quite extreme, but it's also quite progressive. And you know, we wanted to give people a little bit more of a taste of Australian music as well.
Hmm.
So we thought to bring them along to kind of, you know, showcase something else that Australia has. And I think we've had a lot of good feedback in terms of the bands that are involved in it. So yeah, we're really looking forward to being able to share the stage with not only the Omnific but also asymmetric symmetry and also Persephone.
Hmm.
who are band from Andorra, who will be doing both Europe and the US tour with.
Yeah, that's great. And on this tour, are you hitting any places you haven't been to before?
I don't think so. Oh, there might be a couple of cities in the UK. But I don't think there's any countries we haven't done on this particular tour. But
Mm.
ultimately, yeah, whatever, because we want to do more, but uh, it's a lot of it has to do with routing. Everyone's touring at the same time, so a lot of places may be booked out, and you have to deal with what works.
Yeah.
And so the places that we don't get to this time, we'll ultimately try and get to next time.
Yeah, cool. So I've got to ask, it's probably a tough question, but it's been 20 years. Can
Yeah.
you imagine where Neo might be in 20 years' time? Is it still going to be kicking along?
I would like to, but
Yeah,
it depends if everyone's body parts hold up.
yeah,
It's it's I mean, I'd love to be able to, in 20 years, be able to still be doing this. I'd love to do more tours, more albums,
mm,
um, ultimately grow as a band, develop, and have more music out there for people to listen to. So it's 20 years is 20 years ago from now to where we are in this present day. I would never have imagined that. I never imagined actually touring overseas, getting out of Australia to play shows to people overseas. So
mm.
it proves to us that it potentially is possible. And so in another 20 years we'll see. Hopefully we're still doing something. But yeah, it's 20 years will be interesting.
Yeah, cool. All right. Look, I'm over here in Perth, so hopefully
Yep.
you'll make it back here at some point. But yeah,
Hopefully. Yep.
yeah, cool, awesome. Zen, thanks heaps for your time. I'm definitely looking forward
No
to
worries.
hearing the rest of the album in a few days. And yeah, have a good one, man. I'm sure you got a good times ahead. Yeah.